Recently we invited people to tell us how the Welfare Reform Act 2012 will affect their lives. This is what they had to say.
I don't look for much. All I want to do is function and be a member of society.
It's not been properly thought out. As a taxpayer, I expect the government to do better.
We're already on the poverty line. I'm going to struggle. My family's going to struggle.
This isn't the time for people to fight. Give ourselves a shake and come together, because we all need to be united.
I think the welfare reforms are the worst thing that could ever happen to Britain.
I didn't choose to be disabled. I didn't choose to go into a system that is dysfunctional. But it's not us that they need to change, and it's not us they need to cut, and it's not us that they need to assess and process and all these things. They need to have a seriously long and hard look at themselves.
A lot of the people that I support have multiple disabilities, usually a learning disability and some level of visual impairment. What you find a lot, and what I've found over the past few months, is that it will be the people with the greatest level of disability who had despite any cuts to their support and to the benefits, because usually they will already be on a minimum that they can get by with, and any cuts to that will mean a very restricted quality of life, which usually isn't factored into any of these equations.
I struggle anyway, not just with a physical disability but with the mental health issues. And all this change, all this worry about my financial independence in the future is both worrying to me and my family. I'm scared of what's going to happen to me. We're already on the poverty line. If one of my benefits disappears, or if they take my care component or they reduce it or something like that, I'm going to struggle. My family's going to struggle. And I feel guilty because of my condition, that I've got my disability, how it affects on my family. So it's a worry.
Sometimes you think you know everything. The welfare reform is actually going to be worse than I envisage. I get the mobility part of the DLA, and that is spent purely on my car. I mean, that's my independence. Without that part of it, my mobility would go, and without that, lose my job, couldn't get to work, couldn't get out much. I believe greatly in independent living, and obviously independent living has gone, my choice has gone. So yeah, no, that would be, losing the car would be a massive loss to me.
My life's going to be restricted, so you end up just getting into a depressed state as well. You're just not living a quality of life. You don't get the freedom to come and go as you please. And I just feel as though, why should we be penalised? Some of us are still working, although we're working with a disability. Yet there's other people in society that are not even willing to do a day's work in their life.
I'm really worried about how am I going to live on if they cut the benefits, because it's cutting down on money and probably my social life.
If they took my DLA off me, that would be my motor. Now, I can't walk, so you come to Kelty and Fife and try and go on a bus. They didn't allow you to take a scooter on a bus in the first place, because we didn't get accessible buses. And knowing that part of Fife, you maybe get one a day if you're lucky. And there is no way my right leg doesn't work, it's partially paralysed, and I have problems with my pelvis, and I've got arthritis in both hips. My body's knackered, it's a wee bit more knackered, but I speak for a living, sitting in meetings and everything, so what stopped me from working? Doesn't matter what I do, for my backside sometimes, but I still get back up and fight again.
If they're going to change the welfare benefits like the DLA and things like that, I'll lose my car, I'll lose my independence, and I'll end up in a hospital, or worse. It's not just worrying, I'm really terrified for myself and other people that are really impoverished.
I get my mobility benefit, and that goes in my car. Without the car, I couldn't get anywhere. And for what I've seen, I probably will end up with no car, and I won't be going anywhere. The size of the cuts and how it's going to affect all the different areas was the frightening bit, and how much it's taken out the local economy. That was just absolutely terrifying, and I know there's worse to come. I just feel the Tories are just trying to put us back hundreds of years so as that disabled people become what they used to be called, the handicapped. Because we will have a handicap, we'll have no money, we'll have nothing, and that's the way they'll leave us. 3 years' time, I don't envisage I'll be able to get out the door. I shall be trapped within a house, living on the barest minimum of benefit, with a child who will then be 12, and my wife who's also partially disabled, and we'll be left with nothing. We won't have enough probably to feed ourselves by the time this government's finished in 3 years' time.
They have to realistically sit down and look at the effects they're actually creating. There's 1,000 folk committed suicide. Citizens Advice Bureaus, Can't Cope, organisations, websites, their helplines are fit for bursting. I have folk phoning me every week threatening to commit suicide. So I have to work with them specifically before I can even get them to trust somebody in another organisation. They've never thought about all that. All their tests and their paperwork, they've never took into consideration about people's mental health problems or learning difficulties. Somebody sat at the top of the tree saying we have to make these cuts, but actually the money that they're meant to be saving, they're actually losing money because they're paying out more money for the appeals and the tribunals than they're actually saving. So they just haven't thought about it, eh?
Because I'm working, I think I might be okay, but it's mostly my friends I'm concerned about, because a lot of those guys are not in that fortunate position. I don't mind paying for things, but I know that psychologically it has an effect on people if they're not able to take a turn.
They can't see the long-term effect that it's going to have on a lot of people's lives, really. To even think about taking the benefits off the people that generally need it is wrong in so many levels. I'm just not happy with it at all.
Very frightened. And very frightened for the long-term prospects, because, you know, there's all these rumours going about, but they're starting to become reality. When multiple sclerosis came and shut my door, that was scary. But the system they expect people to live in and survive in is 100 times more scary than the condition that they have.
You're even starting to see the disability community fighting at loggerheads now, because you've even got folk out there with one disability thinking, oh, wait a minute, I've seen that person can walk a wee bit further than me, so maybe I'm entitled to my benefit a wee bit more than that. This isn't the time for people to fight. My God almighty, give ourselves a shake and come together, because we all need to be united for to work with the government, whether we like them or not. Sit at the table and fight for the scraps that we have to get for the folk will be there. And I don't care who I've got to meet with or who I've got to speak to. I can't move away from the tables or I wouldn't get it.
The welfare reforms are not thought out properly, and I think they are the worst thing that could ever happen to Britain.
The cut should be in the wages that these MPs are getting. I mean, they're getting all these extra benefits to be an MP. Expenses, they're getting this, they're getting that. And ordinary people can't get enough to make a meal. But they're living a high life. And they just don't care. Ordinary people don't matter to them.
Mr Cameron, about an hour ago I heard a statistic which alarmed me incredibly. Disabled people make up 20% of the population in Scotland, but they're going to bear 50% of the cuts. You said famously the broadest shoulders will bear the burden. These aren't the broadest shoulders. These are the most vulnerable, the most isolated members of society. People with disabilities deserve to have a life too. There will be some people who will not be able to cope and will not be able to exist. You need to think very carefully about what you're doing.
Stop the benefit cuts. It's not right.
I could actually see why people are threatening to take their lives. Because how do they live? You know, people on benefits are proud people as well. But it's just the circumstances that they're in that they need this.
We have tried very hard all our lives to do the right things, be valued members of society. Now they're making sure that we're not the same as everyone else. Completely wrong.
We're going to be the hardest hit.
We would like to thank everyone who shared their stories for this film.